Welcome
to Nods.
I'm Matt.
I'm Carly.
And this is Warhammer Wednesday.
Part 2. Scouting phase.
So today we're talking about the scouting phase. And the scouting phase is pretty simple. But it is...
simple yet deep.
Yeah, it is maybe the sign of a good game. Maybe one of the most interesting...
It adds another layer.
Yeah.
Layers upon layers, this game is.
Yeah, to me it adds one of the most interesting phases to the game, because it's really like
kind of
playing...
a gamble.
Yeah, it's like playing mind games with your opponent, which is always fun. So basically, the scouting phase is a phase... If you look at any of the missions, and you follow them from top to bottom, you make your kill teams, you create the battlefield, and then before deployment, you go into the scouting phase.
So before deployment.
Yep, so before you know
this is before any of the other things like your stratagems and command point tactics and all that stuff.
Before any of that.
You could potentially employ for your guys. This is first.
Yeah, before a model is even set on the board, you do the scouting phase. The scouting phase, basically you have 6 options, and you and your opponent secretly pick one option and simultaneously reveal that option to each other. The way the book suggests doing it, which is a pretty easy way, is that you select a die facing corresponding through numbers 1 through 6 to each of the options.
Easy.
Place it with the die facing you want to pick face up, cover it with your hand so your opponent can't see. Then you go 1, 2, 3, reveal, and you both see what the other picked, and then resolve those picks. Yeah.
So, the interesting thing is that 4 out of the 6
correspond to each other.
Yeah. So,
and can cancel each other out.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy.
Which is the sort of gamble part of it.
That's the gambling part.
So
I thought this is interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about maybe the safe ones.
Yeah, so there's 2 of them. Yeah.
There's 2 of them that are safe. They cannot be countered, and it doesn't matter what your opponent picked. Yours will always go through.
Okay, so that's number 1.
Number 1, scout out enemy forces.
Enemy forces.
Basically, what it means is you get to, during deployment, hold off 20% of your army, which will vary depending on how big or small your kill team is. But basically, you get to hold them off and wait to deploy them until your opponent has deployed their entire kill team, and then you get to place your guys. What is it good for? Well, it's good for getting to see where your opponent places their kill team and then place yours advantageously. Simple as that.
Right.
And that is safe. There's no
counter to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other one...
And except for if you both happen to choose that one, you do a roll-off, right?
Right, you do a roll-off. Whoever wins the roll-off gets to place theirs last, so gets the full effect of theirs, basically. Now, the other safe one is option number 4, scout out terrain, which is where what you'll do is you'll pick, is it D3? Yeah, so you'll pick D3 pieces of terrain, so it'll be either 1, 2, or 3. Pieces of terrain that are difficult or dangerous. So just like in our last video we were talking about craters being difficult terrain, you'd select, hey, this set of craters here, I ignore that particular facet, difficult or dangerous. So if you're playing with a board that is heavy on the difficult terrain, you might want to pick scout out terrain.
It's also dangerous too, right?
Right, dangerous, yeah. So you might pick those.
Yeah, so if you've set up your board to be like, this is difficult, this is difficult, this is difficult, that's dangerous, that's dangerous, that's dangerous, that would be a great one to choose.
Right.
Because you can ignore it.
Because you'd go, okay, I'm going to ignore those particular facets of the terrain. And then your opponent is stuck abiding by them, but you get to ignore them. So those are the 2 safe ones. Now the non-safe ones, why we say they're non-safe is that each of them has a counter pick. And so if your opponent counter picks one of them, you get kind of screwed over. Or if you pick one of the counters, but your opponent didn't pick
the one that it counters,
then you
don't
are
have
SOL.
one. Yeah, and they
So-
get whatever their other one was.
Right.
So it's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird dynamic.
Well, it is. It's a little mind gamey. It's a little gambly. You know.
It's very gambly because it can end up that and then if you do both pick the complementary ones to each other, then nobody gets anything.
Right.
Either.
So it's sort of dangerous in that aspect.
Yeah. So those two sets of two, the first set of two are
is plant traps and disarm traps, which are options 2 and 3. So plant traps, if you pick it and are successful, and you're not countered, you'll pick D3 pieces of terrain, and now there are limitations on that, so it can't be more than 8 inches high, wide, or long. So something like this particular terrain piece would be invalid for trapping, but something like this terrain piece would be valid for trapping.
Okay.
And you basically booby trap it, and if your opponent moves into it, out of it, too close to it, within an inch, then the trap goes off. They take a mortal wound test, so they might get mortally wounded by the trap, and then the terrain and all the area within 1 inch of it becomes dangerous terrain. So it creates this sort of dangerous terrain
it's
zone.
not booby trapped anymore after that, but it is still dangerous terrain.
Right. For your opponent.
For your opponent.
And
not for yourself?
I believe so. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so you cannot trigger the booby trap, but once it's dangerous terrain, your models also can be affected by it.
Interesting. Okay.
So,
all right.
It's sort of a
So
catch,
it is like a dynamic way to both impact, but then it also makes the board more dynamic after that.
Right. Now the counter to that is disarm traps. So you would pick this in the case that you think your opponent is going to plant traps, and it's very simple. It's just that if your opponent did pick plant traps, their plant traps is immediately nullified and doesn't happen. The danger of picking disarm traps is that if you pick disarm traps and your opponent does not, then
you get nothing.
You get nothing
and they get
while
whatever else they picked.
Right. So there's a little danger. Now the other two that go hand in hand are take forward positions and eliminate sentries. So take forward positions, you would pick 20% of your army
to be the sentries.
To be the sentries. And what they do is that after deployment, but before the first round, so before the initiative phase, or like Canticles of the Omnissiah, any of that happening, you get to take a normal move with them. So they would get to move whatever their movement stat would be. So you could use this to either play very aggressively, or you could use it to reposition more in a defensive manner, whatever.
Can you force someone into a charge with it?
No, all you can do is take a normal move, which is just whatever your move. You can't advance. Okay. You can't charge.
But it still can get you into range of being able to charge more easily on your first turn and make sure that you can actually make the charge.
Right, especially considering that the kill team board is so small.
Right.
So now the counter to that is eliminate sentries, which, like disarm traps, only works if your opponent picked take forward positions. So if your opponent did not take that, you're SOL and you get nothing. But if you picked eliminate sentries and they picked take forward positions, you get to take 20% of your kill team and shoot with them at the enemy's kill team, but only at the models that are the take forward positions ones.
All right. So that one, if you both pick complementary ones, it's actually still somewhat dynamic in play, because the person who picked number 5 to take forward positions can still take their forward positions, and then the eliminate sentries one can then still respond. Whereas the plant traps and disarm traps is kind of like...
It's just a straight done. Yeah, nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Right.
So actually, that's the only one that you kind of have that risk, I guess, then of like having nothing happen.
Yeah.
So that is, but again, if you pick eliminate sentries and the other person did not, then you don't get anything.
Right.
One thing also that I think is really interesting about the plant traps and disarm traps one is how it relates to creating which terrain at the beginning of your game and how robust or not you want to be with creating difficult and dangerous and impassable terrain when you set up your board.
Yeah.
Because if you like go super heavy on tons of dangerous and terrain, then that's going to really motivate someone to do scout out terrain, and then that sort of like nullifies a lot of that terrain that you're already doing, and then both people might pick that, and then it's like whatever, and then you've got to keep all this stuff straight. I don't know, it's just interesting. It like kind of interacts too with how you set up your board originally.
Yeah. So that's it for the scouting phase. It's a simple one on the surface, but it's not so simple once you get to the table. But it does go hand in hand with the advanced rules. And like you said, how robust you want to make your table in terms of the difficult or dangerous or impassable terrain that's on there. So, I would advise, just before you start your game, you set up your terrain, because if you don't put any difficult terrain on the board, then there's no reason to scout out terrain. Yeah. So what I always advise is put some form of difficult terrain maybe nearby an objective, perhaps, or through what you might consider being a good zone to move through, just so that you kind of at least create the option for maybe wanting to take scout out terrain. Otherwise, you eliminate something out of the scouting phase entirely.
Well, it also, by knowing that you have less difficult or dangerous terrain on the board, like if you're like, we don't have any, then nobody's going to pick that one, and it probably increases the chance of someone picking plant traps.
Right. That's true.
And then on the flip side, if you've got a ton of difficult and dangerous terrain, then it's like very good chance both people are going to pick scout out terrain, which then can influence like, well, I'm not going to pick disarmed traps because who's going to trap this board? It's already trapped.
Yeah, the whole thing's a trap.
So like So that's interesting.
So there you go. If you liked the video, make sure to give us a thumbs up. Maybe tell us a couple stories about some wacky scouting phase things that have happened to you. Or if we missed something, let us know. We're always looking to improve. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. We'll be coming back to you every week on Warhammer Wednesdays and on Tabletop Gameplay Fridays. Yeah. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.